A disturbing detail emerged the moment Tommaso Cioni appeared at the memorial for Nancy Guthrie. People were not just watching him, they were watching the way he walked. Within hours, investigators and online analysts began placing the memorial footage side by side with the FBI porch video from the night Nancy disappeared, frame by frame, step by step, because the suspect who appeared outside Nancy Guthrie's house at 1:47 in the morning moved in a very specific way, and some people believe the walk looks eerily familiar. But at the exact same time this comparison began spreading, FBI agents were knocking on doors in Nancy's neighborhood asking residents a strange question. Did your Wi-Fi stop working the night Nancy was taken? Because several cameras facing Nancy's house suddenly went offline that night, not the entire network, only the cameras pointing toward her property, which suggests the person who approached Nancy's home may have done something far more calculated. They may have blinded the neighborhood first. Subscribe this channel, because when you combine the memorial footage with the possibility of a signal disruption device, the Nancy Guthrie investigation begins to point towards something investigators cannot ignore. The moment Tommaso Cioni stepped into view at the memorial outside Nancy Guthrie's home, people began noticing something strange. It was not what he said, it was the way he walked. For weeks, investigators had been studying the masked suspect captured on Nancy's porch camera the night she disappeared. The footage was brief, and the person's face was completely hidden, but one detail remained clear in the videos: the suspect's movement. The figure approached the door slowly, with a controlled stride and a slightly forward posture. At first, the video seemed too limited to reveal much, but when Tommaso appeared publicly at the memorial, people began comparing the two clips almost immediately. Within hours, side-by-side videos began circulating online. One clip showed the masked suspect stepping across Nancy Guthrie's porch at 1:47 in the morning. The other showed Tommaso walking beside Savannah and Annie Guthrie during the memorial visit. People slowed both clips down and examined every step: stride length, shoulder movement, the way the suspect transferred weight from one foot to the other, and suddenly, a question began spreading across the internet. Could the two movements belong to the same person? This type of comparison might sound unusual, but investigators sometimes examine walking patterns when a suspect's face cannot be identified. The way a person walks, known as gait, can contain small but recognizable patterns. Even when someone tries to disguise themselves, certain elements of movement can remain consistent. However, experts also warn that gait analysis alone cannot confirm someone's identity. Clothing, lighting, camera angles, and even the surface someone is walking on can change the way they move. That means a visual comparison online cannot prove anything on its own. But the sudden attention on Tommaso's walk revealed something important about the investigation. The case has reached a point where even the smallest details matter, because with the suspect's face hidden and so few physical clues available, investigators may have to rely on patterns, timing, and movement to reconstruct what happened that night. And as people continued studying those two videos frame by frame, another development began to emerge. While the internet focused on Tommaso's gait, investigators were discovering something even more unusual in the neighborhood where Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Several security cameras had suddenly stopped working the night she was taken, and the pattern of those outages raised a far more disturbing possibility. While people online were studying Tommaso Cioni's walk at the memorial, investigators were quietly focusing on something far more technical, happening in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood. In the days after Nancy disappeared, FBI agents and detectives returned to the Catalina Foothills community and began speaking directly with residents again. But this time, they were not asking about suspicious cars or unfamiliar people walking through the neighborhood. Instead, they asked something that immediately caught homeowners off guard. Did your internet behave strangely the night Nancy vanished? Several residents reported something unusual. Their security cameras had missing footage from the early hours of that night. At first, this did not seem alarming because internet outages can happen for many reasons. But when investigators started mapping which cameras stopped recording, a strange pattern began to appear. Not every camera in the area went offline. Only certain cameras lost connection, and the cameras that stopped recording all had one thing in common. They were positioned facing Nancy Guthrie's property. Cameras on the opposite side of the same houses continued working normally. That detail is important because a normal internet failure would typically disconnect every device on the same network. When a router stops working, all connected cameras lose signal at the same time, but that is not what happened here. Instead, it appeared as though only specific cameras had been affected. Cameras that could potentially see the direction of Nancy's home were the ones that stopped recording. For investigators, this raised a serious question. Could someone have intentionally interfered with those cameras? Experts who analyze surveillance systems say that criminals sometimes attempt to disable cameras before committing a crime. In the past, this might involve cutting power lines or physically damaging the device, but modern technology has introduced other possibilities. Some devices can temporarily disrupt wireless connections, causing cameras to disconnect from their networks. If that happened in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, it would mean the suspect did more than simply walk onto the property. It would suggest planning. Someone would need to know where the cameras were located and which direction they were facing. They would also need to understand how to interfere with those signals without shutting down the entire network around them. Investigators have not confirmed that such a device was used, but the unusual camera outages have become one of the most closely examined details in the case, because if the cameras facing Nancy's home were intentionally disabled, it would mean the suspect may have created a blind spot in the neighborhood. And that possibility leads directly to another question investigators cannot ignore. How did the suspect know exactly which cameras needed to be turned off? As investigators examined the unusual camera outages in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, analysts began considering a theory that sounds almost like something from a spy thriller. What if the suspect used a device designed to interfere with wireless signals? Most people imagine a signal jammer as a device that shuts down every electronic signal nearby. But experts explain that some tools can operate much more precisely. Instead of flooding the entire area with interference, certain devices can target specific connections and force them to disconnect from a network. This type of disruption can happen when a device sends commands that trick a camera into believing it has lost its connection to the router. When that happens, the camera stops recording and appears offline until the connection is restored. If someone standing outside Nancy Guthrie's home used a device like that, it could explain why only the cameras facing her property stopped working while others nearby remained active. The cameras were not broken, they were simply disconnected. Creating that kind of blind spot would require knowledge of the area. The suspect would need to know which homes had security cameras and where those cameras were pointed. That information is not always obvious from the street. Some cameras are hidden under roof edges. Others are mounted near doors or garage lights. A person unfamiliar with the neighborhood might not even notice them, but someone who had spent time observing the area could easily learn the layout. Investigators have previously mentioned another strange moment that occurred days before Nancy disappeared. A mysterious person was captured on video walking backward near a different house in the same community. Walking backward can prevent a camera from capturing a clear image of someone's face. At the time, many people believed that footage might have been unrelated, but now investigators are considering whether it could have been a test. If someone was studying how cameras reacted, they might first want to see how quickly the devices activate, what angles they capture, and how far their view extends. Then later, when the real crime occurs, they would already understand how to avoid being recorded. If the suspect truly disabled cameras before approaching Nancy's house, it would change how investigators view the entire crime. Instead of a spontaneous break-in, the evidence would suggest preparation, someone who studied the neighborhood, someone who understood the surveillance systems, and someone who knew exactly how to move through the area without being seen, which raises one of the most troubling questions in the entire investigation. Was the person who took Nancy Guthrie already familiar with the neighborhood long before that night? One of the most puzzling details in the Nancy Guthrie investigation is the amount of time the suspect spent inside her home. According to investigators, the individual seen approaching Nancy's porch camera remained inside the house for roughly 40 minutes. In most burglary or intrusion cases, suspects move quickly. They enter, take what they want, and leave within minutes. The longer someone remains inside a home, the greater the chance of being discovered. But the behavior in this case appears very different. The porch footage shows the masked individual walking calmly toward Nancy's door. There is no visible rush, no sign of panic, and no obvious hesitation. The person approaches with controlled movements, as if they already knew what they were about to do. Once the suspect disappears inside the house, the camera can no longer show what happened next. But investigators believe the timeline inside the home lasted far longer than expected. 40 minutes is not a brief encounter. That is enough time for someone to move through multiple rooms, search for items, or interact with the person living inside the house. Yet when investigators examined Nancy's home afterward, they did not find signs that valuables had been stolen. Her wallet remained in place. Personal belongings were still inside the house. Even medication that Nancy relied on had been left untouched. Those details suggest something important. Whoever entered Nancy Guthrie's home may not have been searching for property at all. Instead, investigators believe the focus of the crime may have been Nancy herself. When someone commits a burglary, they usually leave quickly once they have taken valuables. But when a suspect remains inside for nearly an hour, it suggests something else happened inside that house. Investigators have not publicly released details about what they believe occurred during that time. However, the unusually long presence inside the home has become one of the most troubling elements of the case. Another factor investigators consider is how calm the suspect appeared before entering the house. If the cameras nearby had truly been disabled or disrupted, the suspect may have believed no one was watching. That belief could explain why the individual did not rush. They may have thought they had created a blind spot that allowed them to operate without being recorded. The question investigators now face is why the suspect felt confident enough to remain inside Nancy's home for so long. Did they believe they would not be interrupted, or did they already know something about Nancy's routine that made them certain no one would arrive unexpectedly? Because 40 minutes inside a house is not the behavior of someone acting on impulse. It suggests a level of confidence that investigators cannot ignore. As investigators analyze every clue surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, one theory continues to gain attention. The person responsible may not have been a stranger passing through the area. Instead, they may have been someone who already knew the neighborhood well. The Catalina Foothills community where Nancy lived is known for quiet streets, large properties, and homes spaced far apart. In many ways, that environment provides privacy, but it also means unfamiliar vehicles or suspicious activity can quickly attract attention from neighbors. Residents often recognize the cars that belong in the area and notice when something seems out of place. Because of that, criminals unfamiliar with the neighborhood might struggle to move around without drawing suspicion. A stranger driving slowly through the streets late at night could easily stand out, but someone who lives nearby or frequently visits the area would not appear unusual. Investigators often consider whether a suspect had prior knowledge of a location before committing a crime. That knowledge could include understanding the layout of the streets, knowing which homes have security cameras, or even observing the daily routines of the residents. In Nancy Guthrie's case, several details have led analysts to question whether the suspect had already spent time studying the neighborhood. The possible camera disruptions suggest someone may have known exactly where surveillance devices were located. The earlier video of a person walking backward near another house may indicate someone was testing how cameras responded, and the calm way the suspect approached Nancy's home suggests they did not appear worried about being seen. If the suspect was familiar with the neighborhood, it would explain how they could move through the area without drawing attention. It would also explain why investigators are carefully examining people who have connections to the community. Law enforcement has not publicly identified a suspect in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, but experts say crimes involving this level of preparation often involve individuals who understand their surroundings very well. Someone who knows the streets, someone who knows the cameras, and someone who knows how to move through the neighborhood without anyone noticing. That possibility has led investigators to focus not only on what happened the night Nancy disappeared, but also on what may have happened in the days or weeks before it. Because sometimes the most important clues in a case like this are not found in a single moment. They are hidden in the patterns leading up to it. When Tommaso Cioni appeared at the memorial outside Nancy Guthrie's home, something unexpected happened almost immediately. People online began analyzing the footage in a way that investigators could not ignore. Within hours, clips of Tommaso walking beside Savannah and Annie Guthrie were placed next to the FBI porch footage from the night Nancy disappeared. The comparison spread quickly across social media. People slowed the videos down and studied every detail. They watched the movement of the shoulders, the rhythm of the steps, and the way weight shifted from one foot to the other. Some viewers believed the two movements looked strikingly similar. Others argued that it was impossible to draw conclusions from such limited footage. This type of online analysis has become common in high-profile cases. Thousands of viewers examining the same video can sometimes notice small details that were not obvious at first glance, but investigators also warn that internet speculation can easily create confusion. When people look closely enough at any two videos, similarities can sometimes appear even when the individuals are completely different. Because of that risk, authorities have been careful not to confirm that the memorial footage proves anything about Tommaso Cioni. A professional gait comparison requires precise measurements and multiple video angles. Experts usually analyze stride length, posture, arm swing, and timing between steps before forming any conclusions. Still, the attention surrounding Tommaso's walk revealed something important about the case. Interest in the Nancy Guthrie investigation had not faded. Instead, every new image connected to the story was now being examined more closely than ever before. And while the internet focused on those visual comparisons, investigators were quietly studying something far more technical: the digital evidence surrounding Nancy Guthrie's home. Because in modern investigations, technology often records details that people cannot see. While the public debated the meaning of Tommaso Cioni's gait at the memorial, investigators were focusing on another type of evidence that could prove far more important. In modern investigations, digital data often becomes one of the most powerful tools law enforcement can use. Nancy Guthrie's home contains several devices connected to the internet, including security cameras and a wireless router. Devices like these constantly record technical information about when they connect to networks and when those connections suddenly stop. Even if footage is missing, the systems themselves can still hold valuable clues. Investigators have been analyzing these digital records to understand exactly what happened on the night Nancy disappeared. By studying the timestamps of when cameras stopped recording or disconnected from the network, analysts can build a detailed timeline of the disruptions that occurred in the neighborhood. If multiple cameras lost connection at nearly the same moment, that pattern could suggest interference rather than a random technical failure. Investigators are also examining whether unknown electronic devices were present near Nancy's home during that time. Smartphones, vehicles, and wireless equipment all send signals when they search for networks. In some cases, those signals can leave behind digital traces that investigators are able to analyze later. This type of forensic analysis requires specialized knowledge and can take time to complete, but modern technology often leaves behind small clues that criminals do not expect. Even a device carried in someone's pocket can sometimes interact with nearby networks without the person realizing it. If the suspect used electronic equipment to disable cameras or carried a device connected to wireless networks, that technology may have created a digital footprint, and investigators believe those invisible traces could eventually reveal something critical. Because even when a suspect hides their face and disappears into the darkness, technology sometimes records the evidence they leave behind. Despite weeks of investigation, one central question in the Nancy Guthrie case still remains unanswered: where is Nancy? Investigators continue to analyze every piece of evidence connected to the night she disappeared. From the porch footage of the masked suspect to the unusual camera disruptions reported by neighbors, each detail has added another layer to the mystery. The possible use of signal interference, the long period the suspect spent inside the home, and the growing discussion about gait comparisons have all raised serious questions about how carefully this crime may have been planned. At the same time, detectives are studying digital records, surveillance footage from nearby streets, and any information that might reveal where the suspect went after leaving. Nancy's home. Modern investigations often rely on technology, and even small digital traces can sometimes lead to important discoveries. For Nancy's family, however, the investigation is more than a complex puzzle. It is a painful search for answers about what happened to someone they love. Authorities say the case is still active and that new leads continue to be examined, and until investigators uncover the truth, The mystery surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance remains unresolved. Subscribe this channel for updates as new developments emerge in this ongoing investigation.